I cannot disavow the facts, and I will not apologize for having spoken the truth. And as my lawyers will explain, it is illegal and unconstitutional to censure an MPP for making a political statement, particularly when that statement is true and based in fact. That is not the reason the government members voted to censure me. The Premier claimed that I condoned the October 7th raping and murdering of Israeli citizens. The government motion states that I called for the elimination of the State of Israel. When they voted, government members believed that I had made those statements, and in voting for my censure, they expressed what can only be described as hatred toward me for having made such statements. You will find on my website my open letter to the Premier of Ontario confirming that I didn't make either statement. In the letter, I challenged the Premier to either provide proof and substantiate his false claims or withdraw them and rescind my censure. Again, I cannot apologize for statements that I did not make. My censure is not only illegal and undemocratic and unconstitutional, it is based on a lie that was intended to mislead the government members and create hatred and division amongst Ontarians. A lie that is designed to silence me in the legislature indefinitely. The Premier has not retracted these false allegations, nor has he responded to my request that he use his majority in the legislature to rescind my censure and restore my right to represent my constituents. My case will be based on 1, the facts, 2, my belief that the citizens of Ontario value free speech and honest speech, and 3, that the courts will uphold the democratic right of me and the constituents of Hamilton Centre, even if the Premier and his government will not do so. I now call on my lawyers to provide an overview of the case, Baker, and the legal process, Pazienka. Before doing so, I will remind you that my notice of application for judicial review is on my website, as is a backgrounder by Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch, outlining the constitutional case and distinguishing my censure from that of former MPP Randy Hillier, who was unanimously censured by the legislature and never disputed these allegations against him. Passing it over to Wade.
Let me know with this. Yeah, please. In my view, the legal challenge that we're advancing is about how we govern ourselves in a democracy. While some of you may ultimately disagree with MPP Jama's views as members of the public, you have recourse. Cast your vote for another candidate and don't re-elect her. MPP Jama has not made comments which are hate crimes or that are illegal. She expressed views that are shared by some and views that are also unpopular and distasteful to some. And she has that right. Regardless of our view of her comments, I think we all have to ask ourselves, do we really want to set a precedent where a major political party in our legislature has the power to remove or hamper a whole riding's participation in the democratic process? Over 100,000 people in Hamilton Centre, simply because you don't agree with someone's comments or views, which aren't illegal. This legal challenge is not about Israel or Palestine or any other world events. It's about the democratic process in Canada. I'd encourage the public to think carefully before calling for censure simply because they don't agree with the position advanced by an elected representative. It really is a slippery slope, and the end result is simply undemocratic. Also keep in mind that not one elected representative outside of the major political party voted to censure MPP Jama. Free speech and the ability to counter a view with free speech is a hallmark of democracy. If you don't like MPP Jama's views and you think they're vile, say that. You have the freedom to do that. I've always been a big Star Trek fan, and harken back to one of my favorite quotes, which I think is really important today. With the first link, the chain is forged. The first speech censured, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, changes us all irrevocably. The first time any person's freedom is trodden upon, we're all damaged. I'll turn it over to David Baker.
We as council are here primarily to address any questions that the media may have about the substance of the case or the procedure that will be followed with the case. Wade has provided an overview. The notice of application setting the case out is posted on MPP Jama's website, and I would encourage anybody who wishes to see the substance of the case, to have a look at that application. The case boils down to this, that MPP Jama engaged in political speech. As she said, it was speech that involved criticism of Hamas as well as criticism of Israel, but it is political speech. It is not prohibited speech. It is not illegal speech. She created no indiscretion in the legislature, nor did she do anything to prevent the legislative process from going forward, which is why censure exists at all. At the provincial level, censure only exists for misconduct, and there is no misconduct here. There is nothing in the Legislative Act of Ontario that prohibits what Ms. Jama has done or said, and which would form the justification for her censure. In addition, there has not been a challenge based on the Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country, because this kind of political censorship has never taken place before. But it will be challenged, and it will come before the courts. And the freedom of speech rights that all politicians and all citizens enjoy will be addressed by the court. The democratic rights of elected members and constituents in having their elected members able to participate in the legislature on their behalf will be viewed by the court. The discriminatory way in which this has rolled out will be addressed by the court. So the issues there are all clear. Ms. Jama has indicated that in this particular case, the express basis for the censure was two statements she was alleged to have made and she did not make. And she has called on the Premier to prove that those statements were made. It's serious if the government members who voted for this censure were doing so on the basis of incorrect information. And the courts have addressed issues like this in the past. The most famous constitutional case in Canada is a case called Roncarelli and Duplessis, where the Premier of the Premier of Quebec, Maurice Duplessis, engaged in using his powers as Premier to discriminate against Seventh-day Adventists in his province. And the Supreme Court of Canada made a very powerful statement about the abuse of power, which we say took place in this case, as it did in the case of Maurice Duplessis many years ago. So that's the substance of the case, and the issue of parliamentary privilege will be addressed in due course as a result of the allegations that are being made in the case on behalf of Ms. Jama. So turn it back to Wade if there are any questions to be asked or answered.
So why don't we start with any questions in the room, and then we can move to the Zoom platform if you have questions.
All right, I have a question for Sarah.
Put the mic back in here, please. Thank you. Just send it in, that's fine.
All right, where are you at with the defamation lawsuit, and who's paying for your legal fees?
We're still working on that in terms of the libel case, but I'm really interested in seeing how the judicial review pans out first. But I have every intention on moving forward with that as well. The answer of how it's being paid for, I don't have a clear answer in terms of how much all of this will cost, but it's something that I'm working on figuring out.
This sounds like something that could take a long time. Do we have an estimate on how long this could take?
If you're talking about the So your question is, do we have an estimate of how long it will take?
Yeah.
The censure issue, which is the one on which we are currently counsel, is in the form of an urgent application. We have provided the court with a schedule that would result in the case being heard and argued in April or May of the coming year. There are a large number of organizations that wish to intervene in the case, and the reason why it's taking that long is because there needs to be time provided for the court to assess whether those interveners will be permitted to come in. It could have been heard and addressed as early as March, were it not for the necessity of addressing the rights of interveners to appear on a constitutionally very important case.
All right. Back to Sarah. In the meantime, how do you plan on representing your constituents in that time frame?
Yep, so I still plan on supporting my constituents. We opened our new office. We have staff available at any time. The main issues in our riding have to do with housing, insecurity, and cost affordability, people navigating ODS PNLW. So we're still doing that great work in my office. And in the meantime, I plan to return to the Legislative Assembly to vote and to represent my constituents in that way. Just because I can't speak currently doesn't mean I'm unable to participate in voting. And I'm able to table motions, though I can't move them. So I think there's still a lot of creative ways to still represent my constituents. My priority, of course, has always been and continues to be being present in my riding and making sure that people's basic material needs are being met.
Do you think you can still represent them properly with this hanging over your head?
I believe so. I believe they have been being represented. We've been supporting them with accessing their needs, housing, and food insecurity and so on are the major issues in our riding, so that has been happening. And again, I'm still able to vote. It's very unfortunate that the Ford government has chosen to take away the democratic rights of folks in Hamilton Centre to have a representative. I was democratically elected, and we're arguing that the censure is illegal. And I'm not just doing this legal battle on behalf of myself. It's for every single person who voted to have me represent them and now has lost their voice. And it is unfortunate, but I'm doing everything in my power to fight that while also continuing to represent my constituents here.
Would you have done or said anything differently knowing the situation you're in right now?
I've been asked that question a lot, and what I can honestly say is I think a lot of people are hurting because of what's going on in witnessing a genocide and not being able to do anything to stop it. It's been really harmful and hurtful to see people in positions of power who could do something like call for a ceasefire and won't. And so many people are being fired for saying the bare minimum, including journalists, around what's going on in the Palestinian territory right now. So I know that I'm not alone in the struggle to speak truth and what is right, and not alone in facing repercussions. And so if calling for a ceasefire, if calling a spade, calling violence is wrong, then I wouldn't apologize for that. I wouldn't go back and apologize for it. I know that I waited 3 days to say anything at all, and even that was difficult. I think it's my job as an elected official to say and do the right thing, to call out harm when it's happening. And I know that our federal government is complicit in failing to do our job as peacekeepers in this country by calling for a stop to this violence and the genocidal intentions of the state of Israel. And so all that aside, this is separate than the censure itself, which we're here to talk about today. But no, I think I did everything that I could to stand for people who were hurting in that moment when I put up a statement calling for a ceasefire as one of the first politicians to do so in Canada. And had we called for a ceasefire at that time as electeds on all levels, maybe less people would have died. Maybe we wouldn't be sitting here today with a death toll of over 20,000 people. Thank you.
Okay, let's move online. Are there any questions online?
I have one, yes.
ahead, Bobby.
This is Mr. Silva. Hope you're doing well. You mentioned this could hit the courts as early as April, but is there like how long could this stretch on for the other way? Like if for some reason there's a delay or something like that, is there any idea?
Well, it's an urgent application. There is a meeting with the court Tuesday afternoon to discuss the scheduling, and we have proposed a schedule to the court, which we hope the court will adopt, that would allow it to come to court as early as April or early May. The court has discretion to decide how quickly the case will move forward. We have requested that it be addressed on an urgent basis because Ms. Jama's constituents are compromised and harmed as a result of the withholding of her rights and privileges as an elected member in the legislature. She's mentioned what she is able to do. There are many things she's not able to do, and we have asked the court on an urgent basis to address those. I would say too that it's a very significant constitutional issue, which will be reflected by the interveners that come before the court, expressing concern that under any circumstances, a government could censor its opposition by voting and using the method of censure. If you think about it, there is no reason why this government could not silence the entire opposition. This government assumes that it has carte blanche or has what is called parliamentary privilege that permits them to do whatever they want. As I say, the Constitution, I think, will make it clear that that is not the case.
Bobby, do you have any follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you for asking. Have you heard from the province at all?
Is that question directed toward me?
Whoever wants to answer
I
it.
think, yeah.
No. So Ms. Jama is required to exhaust her legislative remedies before going before a court. So this is a judicial review. Before she can come before a court, she has to exhaust her legislative remedies. The opposition parties have said, we didn't vote for this, we don't support it, but there's nothing we can do because we do not have a majority in the legislature. The Speaker has said, while I may have been wrong not to rule on this before the motion was voted on, and he was asked to rule on whether or not the motion was out of order, make no mistake, he refused to do it. And he's saying now that he cannot retroactively rule. That's the decision that he has made. But the interesting question is the Premier, who has misled not only the people of Ontario, but his own members about the reasons for this censure motion. There is an open letter on Ms. Jama's website to the Premier asking him to either prove that his allegations are true, to substantiate those allegations, or to withdraw them and use his majority to withdraw the censure of Ms. Jama. He has not responded. I don't know if the media has asked him to prove his statements. I do know, however, that there was a libel notice served on him, and his lawyer responded on October 23rd with respect to the first allegation that he made, that Ms. Jama condoned the raping and murder of Israeli civilians, and there is nothing in the response that substantiates that that statement was ever made by Ms. Jama. And I question how the Premier can be allowed to leave that statement unanswered. So Ms. Jama is doing what she can do to have the matter resolved legislatively without having to go to court. But when the Premier answers, if the Premier answers, that will have exhausted her remedies and leave her with no remedy except going before the court.
So I know we have one other media outlet online. Is there any questions, any other questions online?
Hi there, I can jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So Rick Starling, 900 CHML. I had some questions about the like claims in the notice, if we can chat about that. And I think this one is for MPP Jama, if possible. One of the claims was that the Ontario MPP told MPP Jama that she was disloyal to have retained counsel and issued a libel notice against the Premier. So I was wondering if you could provide some more context on this. Who said this and what was that conversation?
I'm not too interested in getting into right now conversations around NDP, anything to do with the NDP really. This is about the censure and the trying to get that removed. But what I can say is that the NDP did know that I was going to serve the libel to Ford before I did so. And just they, am I allowed to talk about the NDP? Do you want me to or not?
This press conference was to address
Yeah.
the censure.
I don't think it's a good idea. I don't really think we should treat the public like HR. And that's kind of what's been happening since I've been booted out of caucus. This legal case isn't about me being booted out of caucus. I think that's in the legal notice to provide context, but it's not the point of this press conference today. So perhaps following up at a later point would be useful on that.
Sure, thank you. Then I believe I have a question for David and Wade. So I've spoken to some experts, and I've heard that, you know, the arguments around there being like an abuse of power around censure just maybe a difficult one to prove around the idea of parliamentary privilege and what's in the scope of parliamentary privilege. So I was wondering if you can speak to that at all, and how do you see that argument?
So the abuse of power argument is, as indicated, based on the Duplessis decision called Roncarelli in the Supreme Court of Canada. The Premier claimed parliamentary privilege over the exercise of his discretion, which he used to discriminate against persons who were Seventh-day Adventists. And the case has never been applied to the legislature, but this is, in our view, an opportunity for the court to decide whether or not to apply the principle of abuse of power to the legislature. This was a group of elected members of the Conservative Party who voted for censure based on untrue allegations that were made. There was hatred expressed by those members towards Ms. Jama based on the allegations that were not true. Clearly, the allegations were intended to create hatred. Clearly, the allegations were intended to divide the people of Ontario and cause divisions within society. And the question is whether that will be permitted to happen. And the abuse of power remedies that the court retains under the Constitution and under the common law Roncarelli principles will be the mechanism through which that will be examined. But let me say again that that is but one of three grounds. I mean, the first ground is that there is no power in the legislature to censure political speech. The second ground is that the Constitution does not permit this kind of infringement of speech and democratic rights. Those are other issues that need to be addressed. The government will claim to have privilege, and the court will determine whether or not the privilege permits that kind of abuse of power, that kind of abuse of the majority vote that they have in these circumstances.
Thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. I'm going to end now. Nick?
I think Bobby just has another question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bobby, if you have one more.
Thank you. I have two more, but I don't think they're too long, if you'll indulge that. The first one is, you requested this as an urgent matter, and so it sounds like the court can decide it's not urgent though, and if that's the case, does that extend when this is heard in court? And if so, by how long?
Well, I think that, the court has power to decide whether to treat it as an urgent matter. That's correct. The court also has the power to address the question of whether parliamentary privilege prevails. Those are matters that will be discussed with the court on Tuesday afternoon.
Okay. Did you have more to add?
I think on Tuesday afternoon we might have more to add.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, if this works in your favor, can the province appeal this? And if so, would Sarah Jama still be censured?
Those are issues that will be discussed in court on Tuesday. And whether we will have an answer on Tuesday, I'm not sure. But those are, it's a good question, and it's a question that is for the court to determine. They have discretion over a lot of this, including whether there are rights to appeal and whether Ms. Jama is left censured or uncensured for the duration of any appeals that go forward.
Thank you.